What's up, guys? Welcome back. I'm Wayne. Today, I am joined by a special guest, Tito, big-time Fiorentina fan. He's in charge of SB Nation's Viola Nation. Tito, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Wayne. How are you?
I'm awesome. I always look forward to this match because having spent a semester abroad, I'm one of those annoying study abroad students who come back and they're like, "Oh, Italy's so great. I want to live there forever. It's awesome. Everything's great." And when reality is like, "No, you just went on a 3.5 month vacation." But one thing that I did get to do was go to so many of Fiorentina's home games, sat in the curva Fiesole, so I have this little bit of affinity of them for them. And this is always a good match, though, wouldn't you say, Tito?
Uh, Not recently. I think I looked at the last 10 Serie A meetings, and Fiorentina have won two, drawn two, and lost six. So, as a Roma fan, I could see how you'd be real into this one right now. But no, I agree with you. It's always a great matchup. Two of the most iconic clubs in Italy, two of the best uniforms in Italy. It's just always a good spectacle, I feel like.
Good point. And you talk about recent form. And when you mention that, unfortunately, I get that, that sight in my head of the 7-1 at the Artemio Franchi. And I'm like, yo, this Fiorentina, you never know what the Viola have up their sleeves.
Yeah, that's very true. Fiorentina can drop seven on you, or get hit by a bus walking into the Franchi at any given on any given day. You never know what it's going to be with this team, right?
Uh, fr- uh, Tito, as I have gotten to know you over the past couple of years, I remember we connected a few years ago when Fiorentina came to Red Bull Stadium and doing a little like guide of the area for Viola Nation. And you and I we've kept in touch in different ways since then. But what I want to know about you and something I didn't know, and I wanted to wait until we were actually recording, is how did somebody in Seattle become a Fiorentina fan?
Oh, well, I'm actually originally from Texas, so that makes it a lot more logical, obviously.
Oh, Texas. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, my grandmother is actually from Italy, from San Benedetto, which is in Reggio Emilia, and she died when I was real young, so I didn't have any real connection with her. But her favorite city was Florence. When she died, my dad kept her ashes in a shoebox in his closet for about 15 years, and then we finally made it over there and scattered her ashes in the Arno. So I always was pretty partial to Florence. And then when we got cable when I was in middle school, I remember we got a Sky Sports. It was the first time we'd ever had cable, and I was just astounded that you could watch soccer all the time on Sky. And they did, I think, maybe every couple of days a Serie A update there. I don't even remember who it was with, but I remember seeing the team in purple, and this was would have been early 2000s, so it was all those incredibly charismatic teams from back then. It was like, oh, they're from Florence, they wear purple. Like, yeah, for sure. Why wouldn't I?
Bro, that's such a pretty story. That's one that has to be out there. When you talk about like Serie A fans and connecting them in North America or something, wherever it is you might be in the world, that's such a really pretty story. And I feel like that's one that should be known by the larger calcio community.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think also, Fiorentina being sort of the island of misfit toys team among English speaking calcio fans makes a little bit of sense too. So all the people who hang out on Viola Nation, we're all kind of a little bit kooky in some ways. I mean, it's very much a hipster team, and we all kind of lean into it.
It
So I
is.
think that helps too. Yeah,
It definitely is. It's not a privately owned stadium. You look back at the retro kits, from the 90s, and it was Nintendo, correct?
yeah. Nintendo, Seven Up on there. Yeah, bunch of
Yeah.
Samontana there for a little bit. Some great sponsors.
That's an ice cream, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was really good.
And of course, we share one player in particular, a legend, of course, Gabriele Omar Batistuta, King of Florence, still to this day, probably.
Yeah, I think so. He's got a statue. Uh,
Does he
he's
really?
yeah, I believe he does. Yeah, I mean I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say he's the greatest player in Fiorentina history. No disrespect to like Kurt Hamrin or
Baggio.
Giancarlo Antonioni, Baggio, any of those guys who are all greats, but I think that Batistuta is probably the one, and I don't think a whole lot of people take exception to that.
Yeah, he gave his last bit of juice for Roma
Yeah,
in 2001 Scudetto season. And without him, it's not the same team.
yeah,
Absolutely not. I
but
mean, those goals.
yeah, he was. he was just magnificent, wasn't he? And great for him too. He spent a long time with a lot of physical health issues left over from his playing days.
Yeah, he has trouble walking today. I remember him speaking about how much it hurts him just to like get out of bed.
Yeah, I think he's doing a lot better these days. Saw during the World Cup a bunch of pictures of him playing paddle with a bunch of old friends. So he's clearly moving around a little better now. So really great to see that he seems to be kind of getting back into the game a little bit.
It's cool. And if you're a younger fan, I want you to check out Batistusta's highlights because the way he generated that much energy and power into a shot, I can't really think of another player who was able to do the same. It's not like he had a big frame, like he was like a North American football player. He was an average. I mean, his size, yeah, of course, a lot of muscle in those legs, but I mean, not like a real muscular bodybuilder physique, and he was able to generate so much is outstanding. It's a testament to just the amount of skill and how can you say like just his overall ability just to get every inch onto that ball. And when he hit it, it was like a bolt of lightning.
Just incredible technique. Great. Yeah, absolutely right. He wasn't like Adriano where he was just a tank. He was just I don't know how he hit it like that.
Right, like Adriano. For someone, you can expect it. Um, but anyway, as we talk about today and we look at Fiorentina, it's been a little tough, I think we could both say. It's been a lot of
Yes.
investment, from Rocco Comiso, Joe Barone, two guys from New York. And I think that maybe Comiso thought it was going to be a bit easier in Italy. Perhaps that the Italians, I don't want to say would bow down to him, but would be a little bit more open to the prospects of a new stadium and giving Fiorentina a little bit of a not not benevolent, but like a amicizia, like a friendly relationship between the club and the city. But I don't really get that impression. Would you say that's kind of accurate?
I think you've nailed that pretty well. I mean, I think that Florence is after Naples the biggest city in Italy that only has one club in Serie A. So the city is always united behind the club in a way that I don't think you get in a lot of other cities, especially the really big ones. But yeah, I think that said, I think the honeymoon period between Rocco and the club is definitely over a little bit. I got to watch my words here. He actually called out my co-writer and co-host on my podcast, Mike McCormack, by name as an undesirable in a press conference last year. So I really gotta watch my words here and make sure that
Oh boy.
yeah, we're not getting in trouble with anybody. But yeah,
Rocco, we're
so
rooting for you. You're one of my guys. I'm from New York too. Please take it easy.
yeah,
I
it's
don't
I
mean
mean
it.
that's no, I think it's safe to say some of the shine is off though. I think some of the fans especially are pretty frustrated after selling Federico Chiesa and Dusan Vlahovic in successive years for I think approximately 140 million euros and seeing very little of that invested back in the team. In fairness to Rocco, he is building a new state of the art training facility, which is I think costing a fair amount of money. I don't know if it's up to 180 million.
I believe that's in Bagno Ripoli,
Yeah,
across the
Bagno
Arno.
Ripoli. Yeah,
Yeah.
just right on the other side. Good geography. But yeah.
I've been
Uh,
there like for 3 or 4 times, Ripoli. I've driven through it.
oh yeah, nice. Yeah, I mean it's a
Yeah.
beautiful place, and the pictures we've seen from the construction site they look wonderful. I think it's going to be a fantastic facility, but it's also like you alluded to earlier, it's not a stadium, and I mean I'm sure y'all with Rome know how it is trying to build a new stadium, right?
Yeah.
It's just impossible.
It's really between the red tape and there always being an excuse and the government not really wanting to go forward with it for whatever reason that they have. And God forbid you come upon an Etruscan artifact, some type of vase from 4,000 years ago, and all of a sudden it's like, no, 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 you can't touch that anymore. So there's an insurmountable number of issues which can get in the way of construction in Italy, which is why when you look around, none of the buildings are tall. Only in like Milan and a few in Torino do you actually have skyscrapers because it's not a thing. And there's even like ordinances in some parts of some cities where you can't build over X amount of height. But I really do hope that Fiorentina is able to get off the ground because I don't root against any team in Italy trying to be economically sustainable. Because what's good for the goose is good for the gander in this situation, right? Like if one team, or let's say there is progress on the legislative side, and we see it becoming just a little bit easier for teams to get stadiums constructed, then these teams will make more money, and hopefully that becomes what's the word, viral, and then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but over time, Serie A, Serie B teams have privately owned stadiums. They can collect the money. They can start to then hopefully finally compete with teams in like the English Premier League. But it's going to take a very long time for that. I don't know if that's ever going to come to fruition only if Italians could have their own way.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm pretty pessimistic on that one, if I'm honest. There's so much bureaucracy, so much red tape. It's so much just so many structural issues kind of built into the system over there, I think, which
And, yeah, and how do you overcome that? It takes generations. And speaking of generations, now that Fiorentina is in life post Vlahovic, post Chiesa, what do you think of some of these new players have come in, and who do you think is like the one guy who has the big ceiling in order to be the next star of this Fiorentina side?
oh boy, I think the next guy, probably the easy answer there is Nicolas Gonzalez. Would have won the World Cup with Argentina, but he got hurt just right before the tournament, which was gutting for him. I think he was clearly pretty beat up about it, and he's still not fully healthy. He's been coming off the bench for the past couple of games, but has been decisive in all of them. Scored a late penalty against Sassuolo, got a earned a foul against Jason Murillo to get him sent off against Sampdoria in the Copa. What was that? Yesterday? Boy, howdy, that was just
Yeah, two
yesterday,
days
huh?
ago. Was it just yesterday? Yeah,
I think it was. Yeah, man. What?
yeah, that was.
Yeah, what is a calendar, right? Yeah, he's an incredible player. Extremely quick, really good on the ball. Very difficult to stop. He draws an outrageous number of fouls. Surprisingly good in the air. Works really well off the ball too, which is what I think would have made him crucial for Argentina. Clearly, it didn't hurt them in the long run, but I think probably would have fixed some of those issues we saw for them earlier in the tournament.
He was a large purchase for Fiorentina, correct? Coming over from Germany.
He was, I think, something like 24, 25 million euros out of Stuttgart.
And what's his situation right now? Is he still injured?
He is still injured. There's a lot of transfer speculation right now in the local press from people who are connected to the team. It sounds like Leicester, that Premier League money, like we were talking about, is just extreme. Heard rumors of a possibly 35 million euro bid,
Wow.
which for Fiorentina would be tough to turn down for a guy
Mm-hmm.
who, I mean, again, I think that he's a 40 classer. Like he comes on the field and he's just clearly the best player there, I think, most of the time. But he misses a lot of time with injury and has throughout his career. So I don't know if he's the most reliable player in that regard.
Yeah, you start to think about 35, and it's like right in that range of do you
Yeah.
want to?
And I think he's 24 now, so he's definitely not old. He's probably not the finished article quite yet, but it's hard to imagine his value getting higher. I think the problem for Fiorentina is, they're really good at selling players and getting the maximum financial result from that. Haven't seen as much of that on the purchasing side yet, and I think that's what has a lot of the supporters anxious. I mean, getting rid of Chiesa, Vlahovic, Lucas Torreira over financial issues. I think a lot of fans would really prefer to keep Nico at least until the end of the year.
Yeah, and Icone, has he really worked out, would you say?
Jonathan Icone he's one of the stranger players I've seen for Fiorentina in a little bit. He's absolutely unbelievable on the ball. He can dribble past anyone. He's slippery like an eel. He's got incredible pace, wonderful technique on the ball. But there's something that happens to his brain, I think. Like the closer he gets to goal, like the slower his brain moves. And it's bizarre. He'll dribble past like four people and then just hammer a shot that almost hits the corner flag on its way out. I've never seen anything like it. Someone who's so consistently brilliant until the end.
So with Icone, and I look at Gonzalez, and I look at Cabral, there's one big thing missing, which you pointed out here, and that's Lucas Torreira. And when Fiorentina did not re-sign him, I was astonished because to me, when I watch Italiano and in the middle of his 4-2-3-1, this guy seemed fundamental. He seemed the workhorse, the engine, but also at times even the playmaker in the middle of Italiano's setup. So why? Why would they keep other guys? To me, that seems like the one guy you do keep. What do you think happened there?
Again, I'm not, especially recently, Viola Nation has not had real close access to Fiorentina after we got called out for being malcontents a few months ago. So this is not coming from a place of being an insider or anything. This is just sifting through rumors. But my understanding, talking to people around the club, all off the record, naturally, Rocco, if you're hearing this, all off the record, don't fire anybody, please, is that there was an appearance-based bonus in his loan deal from Arsenal, and Fiorentina benched him for the past couple of games to avoid paying it, and he was not into that, and the relationship deteriorated from there. I think part of it also was that Fiorentina had previously bought Sofian Amrabat, who you may remember as the tank who rolled over every midfield in the World Cup. It took him a few years to really settle in at Fiorentina, but towards the end of last year, he really started to show who he was, and then this year he's just been unbelievable. Maybe the best midfielder in Serie A, I would argue.
Yeah, he's been great. That's
He
a
really
really good
has,
point.
and
It's a good shout.
it is. And I think the club saw it as we can only keep one of these two, which I don't think was the right call. Frankly, I think it would have been worth having Torreira, especially since the replacement was Rolando Mandragora, who has been up and down, let's say.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Rolando Mandragora. I love any player who gets fined by the league for blasphemy. That makes him one of my favorite players, but hadn't really contributed much besides that.
Yeah, he had, I would say, like, I don't want to say big expectations, but he was, I think, seen as this player who could come up and fill a role and perhaps even like a national team prospect, but really has just kind of worked into being an average player.
Yeah, nothing. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but I don't think that he's anywhere near Torreira with respect.
Yeah, it would have made sense to really keep both of them, let those two run, especially keeping Arambat a little bit deeper and getting Torreira a little bit forward, as he often liked to do. And then, of course, ahead of him, you have a player I really like who is Cabral. How is Cabral doing this season?
It's been a little bit uneven. He was struggling. Both he and Luka Jovic, the other striker, started off pretty ice cold, frankly. Just a lot of misses for Cabral. Seemed like he wasn't settling in, wasn't a really good fit for Italiano. But then since the restart, he'd been really good. He'd shown a lot of his athleticism. He'd been drifting a little bit wider. He'd really been using his physicality to hold the ball up and give opposing defenders trouble. Scored an absolutely incredible goal against Monza last week. If you haven't seen that, go look that up on YouTube. It's unbelievable. It looks
That
like
was
a
a great one.
Batistuta goal with the way that he hit it.
Angle,
And yeah,
really tight
just
angle on that one.
just an incredible finish. And then naturally he did his hamstring against Sassuolo a few days later and is now out for about a month.
Fingers.
So yeah, right. So yeah, it's been a little bit tough for him. I think he was. I mean, I think it's just bad luck, right? As he was starting to settle in, got hurt. I think when he came in last January, people very unfairly assumed that he was supposed to replace Dusan Vlahovic's production, which I don't think that was never going to happen.
No.
So I think the burden of expectations kind of got him a little bit, and that just kind of made it a fugue state for him. And then this year, bringing in Luka Jovic, a little bit the same thing. And then right as he finally started to build up some momentum, now he's got an injury. So I still think he's a really good player. I don't know if he's ever going to be like a 30 goal a season striker, but I think that he's the kind of guy who can consistently give you 15 in Serie A, and that's a really valuable player, especially for a club like Fiorentina.
Yeah, I see him as a 15, right around there, same as you, and I really agree on that number. And I'm looking at Fiorentina right now, ninth place, just about the same goals allowed as goals scored. And would you say that this team is growing, or would you say that they are kind of like looking for the next answer?
Ooh, both. I would say a little bit of both. I mean, obviously, they're in ninth. It's not been a brilliant season. That said, they are competing on three fronts. The club hasn't done that in oh boy a long time. I think their last European campaign before this was 2016. So I think that's been an adjustment. There's not really a lot of institutional knowledge at the club to help people work through that. Italiano, same thing, never competed on three fronts. So this is a growth experience for him as well as a manager. Uh, I think we're seeing a lot of players really grow, but I think also Fiorentina, Cabral's been hurt, Nico Gonzalez has been hurt, Ricardo Sotil has missed months. There've been so many injuries for this club. Luka Jovic has missed time. Gaetano Castrovilli is just getting back now. There's just been so many injuries.
That's
And I think
ridiculous.
it is. I think it's interrupted a lot of
Every
momentum. I
decent
think
player on the team.
it almost feels that way sometimes. I think that having the World Cup in the middle of the season and then the compressed schedule, I mean, obviously this affects everyone, right? But I think that Fiorentina has maybe played more competitive fixtures than anyone in Serie A this year because they had to get through the Conference League playoff system as well. So they've just been playing twice a week, pretty much constantly, with a squad that's just not really designed to do that. And I think it's taken its toll.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when I look at, well, I think it's actually a testament to maybe some character that this team does have that they went on and they finished second in their conference league group, so they do get out of the group, correct? So
They do.
what's next right now? They were second, just above Hearts from Scotland, and just behind Istanbul Buyuks. So they drew level with them, both on 13 points. How far do you think Fiorentina could realistically go here in the conference?
I really couldn't say. They're up against Braga in this next round, which is a tough fixture. Braga's in second in the Portuguese league, and they look really good.
That's going to
Yeah,
be quite a test for
I think
Fiorentina.
it is. I think it's going to be a really good, really interesting matchup for sure. I don't know who the favorites are. I haven't looked at the betting odds or anything, and I don't really follow the Portuguese league that closely, so it's not like I've watched a lot of Braga and have an opinion here.
Yeah,
But I think it'll be a really interesting game or a really interesting set of fixtures. I'm looking forward to it. Realistically, I think Fiorentina can probably make it to the I don't know, let's say the quarterfinals would be a
hmm
good goal. I mean, it would be obviously wonderful to win it, as you know.
yeah,
Winning the conference league hits a little bit different for everyone. Get that conference league tattoo.
yeah.
But yeah, I think realistically there are going to be a lot of good teams in there, especially some of the ones dropping down out of the Europa League, and there are going to be some squads that I think have a little bit more depth, some more financial resources. So yeah, I think quarterfinals I'd feel pretty good about it. I mean, even going
Cool.
out against Braga with all the injuries, I wouldn't feel terrible.
And speaking about the current Conference League champion holders, how do you feel about this Roma so far? I'm going to guess you've caught a couple of their games with Mourinho at the helm. Now we have Dybala. I don't know if you've been following, but we've had our own little recent injury crisis going on between Salik, our right back, some issues with Karsdorp. Dybala faced like almost half the season on the sidelines, and Pellegrini had his own issues. Vinaldum broke his leg after the first game of the season. And I very much sympathize with what's going on with Fiorentina because it's such a hindrance. But all that being said, we know that Roma have all the expectations to win this match. It's just from every standpoint, they should be able to. However, Fiorentina, I never doubt them because they have a very good coach with Vincenzo Italiano. Now these are two managers who are looking to play on the counter. Vincenzo Italiano loves to get the ball out to the wings and then get it down the pitch very quickly and then maybe cross the ball in for a big striker like Cabral or Jovic. And Mourinho doesn't play entirely too differently. I would say that he does a little bit more combining with his trident and likes to get the ball up the pitch that way. Oftentimes, he'll have one player in his trident come back and be the ball carrier, and then the player on the opposite flank will make like a darting run, and then the center forward will come to check in with the ball. What player do you think could pose? Let's take out Dybala. What player do you think poses the biggest threat to Fiorentina come Sunday afternoon?
Oh man. I would have said Lorenzo Pellegrini just because Roma have been scoring so many set pieces that the guy delivering them is clearly the threat. But I've been hearing he might not even be fit for it. Sounds like he's got a calf issue. Not sure.
He's
Uh,
probably touch
I'm,
and go.
yeah, I'm sure you know more about it than I do. I'll say probably Nicola Zaniolo then, just because. I mean, you know his history. He came up through the Fiorentina academy, and they chose not to extend him because they're a bunch of dummies most of the time. And he seems to really, really enjoy scoring against the Viola and letting them know exactly how stupid they were. And so I do not really enjoy playing against him. The other one I'll name is Zalewski, who's just been fantastic, I think, this year as a ball carrier. I really, really like him getting through the lines and getting Roma into the final third quickly.
These
And
are
I've
interesting
been,
names you put here.
oh,
I
well,
like
thank you.
them. I honestly thought you would have went with Abraham just because being a number nine. But I like that you mentioned Zaniolo here. He's been in some tough form, but I don't. The hope is never lost, right? And I think that if he gets if a couple different one or two things can be put into his brain that Mourinho can craft and really work with this player, then you're talking about a very dangerous one because there's two Zaniolos. There's the one who works very hard and gets on the end of everything and is a menace but sometimes doesn't get the referee's calls. And then there's the other Zaniolo who looks uncomfortable in his role. And I never know when he takes the pitch which one we're going to get. But with that motivation of playing against his former club or his youth club, that does make for an interesting storyline here. And then you mentioned Zalewski, who's not has such a prosperous season as he did last year. I think because there was less weight on him, there's less expectations, and anytime he did anything good, it was seen as a big bonus. But this year, those expectations are there, and with that, he's come back down a little bit to earth. But as he becomes that ball carrier, and both these teams will be trying to counterattack, that could make another interesting scenario here. Who do you think will be on the right flank for Fiorentina? Because Zalewski is a left wing back. So who do you think he's going to be coming up against?
I think Jonathan Ikone is likely to play as the right winger at fullback. It's probably going to be Dodo, who's been in his first
Eh,
year in Florence. He's been, yeah, I don't think he's been great, but he hadn't been bad either. Outside chance that it's Lorenzo Venuti, whom I love dearly because he's a native Florentine, grew up going to games in the Cordova Fiesole, but has also had a slightly rocky year or two. And so I think most fans are going to hope that it's Dodo and not Venuti.
cool. All right. So we'll be watching for these matchups in midfield as well. Arambat versus probably we never know from the Roma side who they're going to go with in midfield, and this has been an interesting situation where we have a bunch of different midfielders and there's been no continuity. We have a kid named Benjamin Tahirovic from he came up got promoted from the youth academy. There's Cristante, who you know, Matic, who's one of Mourinho's boys. Then there's Kamara, a player we have on loan from Olympiacos. He's been good, but hasn't been used that much. Sometimes Pellegrini has dropped back into the double pivot as well. So from my perspective, we never know what it's going to look like. Um, but anyway, I'm thinking 1-0 Roma. What do you think?
I think that's a pretty reasonable prediction. I mean, I wouldn't expect a lot of Mourinho teams to go with too much more than one goal. Generally, I feel like that's kind of been the pattern for Roma this year. Yeah, I see that like long face you pulled for just a moment there. Uh, Feels like you might agree with me.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I think Fiorentina, especially with the injuries. Lucas Martinez Cuarta, one of their defenders, also picked up a knock yesterday, so he might be out as well. It's just, oh boy, it's like a field hospital out there.
Jeez.
Yeah, I think I'll probably say 1-0 to Roma feels good. I think especially at the Olimpico. I mean, I imagine it's going to be a pretty rowdy atmosphere there. So yeah, I think 1-0 sounds good. I wouldn't be shocked if Fiorentina managed to pull out a 1-1, but Mourinho's got that defense playing really well, leading Italy in clean sheets right now. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I think
tied with Juventus and Inter. And I think in the
yeah,
past, since Mourinho has joined.
yeah. So I think that I don't trust Fiorentina's attack that much, especially with Cabral out and Nico Gonzalez possibly still limited. So I think a 0-1 sounds probably about right, if I'm honest.
Cool. All right. Let's do it, Tito. May the best team win.
I'm looking forward to it, man.
Thanks for joining us, Tito. Follow him. Check out Viola Nation. Great content, especially if you love keeping up with what's going on with the other teams in Serie A and Fiorentina. The relationship has never really been bad between these two teams. We've hosted at Roma Club New York. We've hosted Viola Club New York, and we've always gotten along with them. Pretty cool guys. I have some close friends of mine who are Fiorentina fans too. So it's always kind of just a good game, and that's what we hope for.
Yeah, no, definitely looking forward to it. Didn't know you were hanging out with the Viola Club New York guys. They're great.
Yeah,
Next time you
once or
see them, give them my
twice
best. Yeah,
for sure.
they're a blast. Yeah. So yeah, man, appreciate you
Cool.
having me on. I'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Tito.